Culture Radio, keeping you informed.
Demerara and Essequibo 99.1 FM.
Burmese 99.5 FM. Culture Radio.
It is 19 hours 30 all across Guyana on this Saturday. Welcome down to a special edition of Room 592 with Dr. Yog Mahadeo and Leonard Gildarie. They are awaiting their esteemed guest, Mr. Sanjeev Datadin. But in the meanwhile, good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening to you, my friend Kevin Smith, and good evening to Joshua Van Slightman. I know he's at home today. Lucky man, I must say. And good evening to the entire Kaito Radio crew that's working hard behind the scenes to make Room 592 possible. As I also say good afternoon to my co-host, Leonard Gildarie, and to all of you viewers and listeners from across the country, wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to Room 592, where we unleash the truth. Leonard, it has been a very hot evening, my friend. How has been the weather, the temperature near where you are there? Has it been any cooler in terms of the political temperature than it is where I am?
Well, definitely not. Everybody's paying very close attention. I mean, the weather, in terms of the weather, the rain has eased, but when it comes to the temperature of the political climate, it has gone up octaves higher, to use music and talk about temperature there, to mix it up. That is because it's 18,000, and you and I and our guests are going to look into that a little later. But what has happened now? The elections report for the recount report, that is now before the GCOM chair, and she's studying that. There has not been a formal meeting yet with the commissioners to discuss that. I believe that may happen tomorrow. Let's keep our fingers crossed, but definitely by Monday we should have a very clear idea what it is. But it's a lot of pages. I think I was just going through it. It's showing the regions by regions, and in essence a description of what would have transpired in that region or in those regions, as according to the Chief Elections Officer, Keith Lowenfield. Obviously, the coalition, the opposition has come out and they are very upset about what they've seen here, Yog, and they have stated that he has no authority to do observations like this. This should be a matter for a petition, an elections petition, but there's several sides to the story. I must tell you that we did invite Mr. Darren Wade and a couple of others, but they are very busy. Things have come up tonight. They're having meetings and so on. And so we don't have those persons here. But over to you back, Yog.
Thank you, Leonard. And just before I say welcome to our guest for tonight, Attorney at Law, Mrs. Sanjeev Datadin. Ladies and gentlemen, let me disagree with Leonard. Leonard, I don't like your aspersions there, my friend. You have said that this report by Lowenfield, you have called it a certain way there just now. I don't like it. I'm gonna put a different way on it, a different thought on it. Look. Lowenfield had an opportunity to redeem himself from what he did on March 14th. He has shown this country, he has shown everyone exactly who he is. Notwithstanding an opportunity to redeem himself, he has come out swinging for one side. He obviously has a horse or some meat or something in this game. I must tell you, Leonard, again, just before we ask the opinion of our learned counsel, I must tell you, it is my humble opinion that number one, Lowenfield's opinion of the observations was uncalled for. No space for that. Number two, if one were to say that, okay, he has space for it, Lowenfield just threw all of his returning officers and his polling officers and all of these people under the David G. bus. They must all, and I'm going to take private attorney if I have to and file a private action if I have to, as a citizen of this country, because if those irregularities, if those frauds did take place, they must all, whoever perpetrated those frauds, must face the full force of the law. We cannot have this kind of treasonous action take place without repercussions. And thirdly, Leonard, Mr. Lowenfield, in my own view, has, while having had an opportunity to redeem himself, chose to walk down this path, chose to walk down this road. And there are many hypothetical situations and many hypothetical scenarios we can play out. But before we get into those things and before we look at what ifs and all of that, you know, I want to welcome Mr. Sanjeev Datadin. And ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Gildarie will be entertaining maybe one or two calls later on in our show tonight. If you have any peculiar or particular question, while we didn't tell Mr. Datadin this, you know, we certainly are going to put him on a spot. But if you have any particular question or clarification you seek, please call in. Mr. Gildarie will be sharing the number. It's also on screen. Sanjeev Datadin, attorney at law, sir. Welcome to Room 592. My apologies for the late call, but it is what it is.
Good evening, Yog. Good evening, Leonard.
Good evening.
Good evening to your viewers and listeners. And of course, good evening to my beautiful wife. It's an odd thing. We've seen this before with Mingo. We've seen, I've heard what Leonard was saying at the very beginning, some strong language and some strong things. But quite frankly, what's going on evokes a lot of emotion. The Guyanese people are saying to themselves, and they're saying very publicly about what's going on, why are these things going on? And why isn't there some form? Don't we have any public officials in this country with integrity? Don't we have any of them that act fairly, do their job? I mean, that's all we want them to do your job. Mm-hmm. And this is where the problem is. We seem to be struggling to find public officials that would do their job. Every day, we spend hours of time on radio, on television, discussing whether they will actually do this. And we hear all the discussions of what the law is. And then invariably, we turn up with them pretty much doing what they want to do. And you begin to wonder why. I mean, the law is very clear that Mr. Lowenfield has a role to play. But Mr. Lowenfield's job is to do a tabulation of the recount from the 10 regions that have been declared. The 10 regions at the recount have been done. We have regions 1 through 10. His job was simply to add it up. As the saying goes, he had one job. One job, just total it up and say this is what the national votes are, and this would be the allocation of seats. I have looked, I've made an effort today, and I have obtained from the declaration, the CEO's report in 2015 and 2011. And in both of those reports, it's a mathematical thing. Regions 1 to 10, it was worded this way, Yog. It says basically, these are the figures, and please find attached this statement, the tabulation reports for region 1 to 10 to support it. And that in accordance with the statute, the allocation of seats are as this is the number, this is how the allocation is, this is what I think is the allocation of seats. That's as simple as it was. Okay. Nothing more, nothing less.
Okay. So with regards to, it was a two-part report, wasn't it, Mr. Datadin? It was one, the matrices, and then a summary of the observations, right?
Yes, but if you actually look at it for what it did, Yog, it is astonishing. The first thing is that it was not asked for. And the second thing about it is there was no place for Mr. Lowenfield to do it. He had no authority to do it, and he was not asked to do it. So there are two sides. One, no one asked him to do it. And two, he had no authority to do it even if he was asked. The second, then you go one stage further. He made these decisions based on no evidence. he took into consideration irrelevant things. Irrelevant evidence is what he took into consideration. So he took the irrelevant considerations being, he took the complaints and the observations without any proof attached to it. He then did he ignored the fact that these objections were all objected to, and he ignored the fact that there was no proof for him to which he goes. So he took into account irrelevant considerations, and he also ignored relevant considerations. So all of this was done. Mm-hmm. Then, if you look at the report, he says that he finds that it's not credible. His opinion doesn't matter, sadly. Mm-hmm. And he says also in the report that the uninfected boxes by these anomalies, which he has imposed upon himself to do, he says this self-imposed thing, and he changes the count. If you were to follow Lowenfield's figures, and this is only my addition, and I could have made a mistake, I think the election result he once declared is something in the region of 125,000, 128,000 for APNU and 56,000 for the PPP, and the smaller parties get nothing. Mm-hmm. So it's a 2/3 of parliament he really thinks has happened, if he's correct. I mean, that's preposterous. I mean, if you take his figures, APNU 1, Region 6.
But Sanjeev, just stick a pin. I'll stick up for one moment. That 2/3, if that is what the numbers are bearing out to be, it is also sinister, isn't it? Because you know what 2/3 in Parliament does.
Yeah, changes
it is
the Constitution.
Very, very sinister. And it means a party with 2/3 in just for viewers and listeners, Mr. Smith said that it would be better at explaining this, but 2/3 of a National Assembly can make laws, break law. They don't need anybody.
They can amend the Constitution, all the constitutional entrenchments. The only 2/3 is the highest, and the only thing beyond that is a referendum. Mm-hmm. And perhaps they might be so bold as to have a house or mouse referendum and abolish all. I know a lot of people might be, including myself. I was too young for that. I read about it, told about it by those events by my father. Explained a lot of that to me. But the reality is that's the risk. And 2/3 majority of Parliament is a very dangerous thing to have. But it begs the question, you know, all of this that was going on, it was not unknown of what was transpiring. And Mingo has been or is a dark spot on the history of Guyana. And surely Lowenfield would have seen that Mingo was caught out in the end, and what he was saying cannot be justified. And what he was doing could not be justified. But what do we see happening? We saw one man, Mingo, hijack the entire process for APNU to declare a victory. And now we have another man who is doing exactly the same thing. He's hijacking the process again. $8 billion was spent of taxpayers' money for this. And if one man can just choose to disregard the law and then that becomes it, then how does that happen? Mm-hmm. How does that happen? Do we not have any person of any integrity any longer? Do we not have persons of any, no public official has any respect? No public official has any regard? What has happened to Guyana? How did we get here?
And Sanjeev, I wanted to jump straight into it. The order that was issued to make this recount possible, what does the order say with regards to the role, one, the role of the chief elections officer, and two, with regards to how the commission and maybe even, let's go even further, what the chairperson, the role of the chairperson, how does it address or don't address it?
Basically, what the order says is that Mr. Lowenfield is supposed to prepare a report of the votes, the tabulated votes, and he should give a summary of any of the observations he had. Now, it doesn't mean he give a commentary on them. He gives a summary. So I received or 150 objections were made as to migrants, 500 objections were made as to dead people. That's what you would expect in the summary. And what he's supposed to do is present that to the commission by today. And the commission has to consider it and then tell him whether to present the statutory information, which he has to do pursuant to Section 96 of the Representation of the People Act. And by doing that, he would then submit his report to them, and they would go.
So I
Right.
wanted to ask you, was there, and this is me as a layman talking, was there any contemplation, and let's look at some outside scenarios here. We assume that there was widespread fraud within these elections, and there's going to be a recount. Was there any contemplation at all for somebody who doesn't know for how any observations or anything that anomalies or anything else that would have come up, how it was to be treated? How does the order treat this? And I want you to address that because there seems to be a lot of confusion as to whether or not.
Leonard, if you look at his report, his report declares that the PPP won by 15,416 votes. That's what his report says. He then takes it upon himself to inject, because his report has two parts, right? He has the words part where he has, and he has the charts, which he has in his report. And I think it's been circulated, everyone has seen it. If you look at his report, he has the recount figures accurately reflected as to what he had. And that part of the report is what the law says he must provide to GCOM. And in fact, it is part of the order of what GCOM said we would like you to provide to us. So he did provide that. He provided the figures of the recount that we all know. The PPP won the election by 15,416 votes. He knows that. He then went and volunteered this opinion about the elections not being credible and the elections not being fair. So he is trying to say that I have all this information and he takes it upon himself. That's not part of his mandate. He was not required to give an opinion. He does not have the information upon which he can give an opinion. This is the equivalent of a situation like this, Leonard. You're there, and I came into you and said, Yog took $5 from me. You weren't there, so I said that. You didn't ask Yog if he took the $5 from me. You didn't verify that I had $5 to begin with. You haven't bothered to check if Yog has $5 on him. You didn't check if Yog was present. You didn't check if Yog and I were ever actually present together for him to do it. I'm just giving you a scenario. And you then produce a report that said Yog took $5 from me. How did you come to the conclusion? I could have been telling you a lie. Yes. But you can't come to a finding. You can't make a finding based on that. Now, the part that he went beyond his mandate for was he went beyond his mandate to say about whether the elections were credible. But he had no basis for coming to that conclusion. There were observations by APNU, but those observations have nothing to support them.
And here is where I would like us to deliberate a little on. You have been a litigator for a good while. I don't want to make you sound to be old, so I changed long while to good while. You you have been pleading cases in front of the best of judges, including the CCJ. Sanjeev, for Mr. Lowenfield, first of all, it seems like this report was the handiwork of more than one person, and I'll tell you why. On part one, you are seeing, they say, that a total of XXX votes stand to be impacted by voter impersonation.
Yes.
On another section of the report, you're seeing a totally different section. You're seeing so much 44,225 votes were impacted. It's a decision. It's a very different language. Now,
Yeah.
So it seems like there was more than one author to this report that was thrown together. That's one thing I want you to comment on. The second thing, Lowenfield had 5 days. It seems like in these 5 days, he documented all the allegations of fraud, allegations of voter, but the man has done an investigation and he has examined evidence and he has made a decision. Lowenfield has become the judge, jury, and executioner. Your comment, sir.
Well, he has, but you see, in my opinion and in my assessment, this is if we take it from as relating back not only to your question, but relating back to what Leonard was saying earlier. If we are to take it and just for a moment, forget the issues in the general terms, but if we were to take it strictly back to public law and public law principles, we start with the fundamental things that all public bodies created by a statute are only entitled to do that which the statute permits. For example, magistrates are creatures of statutes as well. They are statutory bodies. So magistrates don't have the same power judges do. Magistrates have no inherent jurisdiction to do anything. Judges have inherent jurisdiction to be fair. Magistrates have no choice. They have to apply the law as written in the books. They don't have the discretion that a judge would have. But the position of all of that we should appreciate is that public bodies, GCOM is a public body. The office, GCOM is created by a statute and the Constitution. The office of CEO, Chief Elections Officer, is provided for in the statute and the Constitution. So these are statutory bodies. He did do the part of the job he should have, which was the tabulation of the votes. And that's what he was entitled to do, and that was what was requested. What should happen, and GCOM as a public body should disregard everything else that he has done because he doesn't have the power. But that's what the law says you must do. A public body must receive from you all the information they're entitled to, and they are to deal with it what they're entitled to. What they're not entitled to as a public body, they have to leave at the door, and they have to move forward with only the information and whatever it is that they're entitled by statute to address. If they are not entitled by statute to address it, they have to say to you, you have to take it to whichever tribunal or forum that you have to do. Let me give you an example, and I don't want to give people ideas because it's not a great example that I'm telling you. But the reality is this. If there is a land dispute, if, let's say, Leonard and Yog, the two of you have a dispute over a piece of land, and as a result, God forbid, you get into a fight about it. Now, the fight would be obviously go to the magistrate's court. But the law is that if you have a land dispute and a fight comes about it, etc., the magistrate has no jurisdiction because the High Court is seized with a land dispute already. And you might have been very civil with each other, and it might have degenerated into two cutlasses, etc. But the thing is, only the High Court has jurisdiction. So what the magistrate can do is receive everything except about the dispute, the land dispute. But once they have ascertained that fact, they have to tell you, go to the High Court and let them deal with it. Now, the same is true for what GCOM should address. GCOM should take from the report that has been the information provided by Lowenfield and say, well, these are the numbers that you have. But as it relates to this other part that you are addressing, then we have to go to another forum. That other forum is, of course, the High Court. So that's what should happen.
Seems like you have blackout there too, but
Yep, everywhere's got blackout apparently.
I think the boys in our studio arranged that with GPL. They have some kind of unholy alliance with that. But Yog, there is before you move on, there's something that we should take note of. A few moments back, or maybe 20 minutes ago, the Attorney General Basil Williams, the Minister of Legal Affairs, would have sent out a statement. The headline for that, and I guess it's pretty long. GCOM's jurisdiction enables it to resolve irregularities, discrepancies, and anomalies. And it goes on to say basically this thing can go to court. GCOM could deal right away with these issues that have been raised by Kit Lowenfield.
I am just walking for my glasses so that I could give you a little bit of information from what the Constitution says.
Yes, sir.
Careful about taking things from the Basil Williams. But I'll tell you this.
Yeah.
Our Constitution, Article 163, and I'll just read you the basic part. It says, subject to the provisions of this article, the High Court shall have exclusive jurisdiction to determine any question, A, is regarding the qualification of a person to be elected a member of the National Assembly, or B, whether either generally or in any particular place an election has been lawfully conducted or a result thereof has been or may have been affected by any lawful act or omission. And it says that this is the exclusive jurisdiction of the court.
Of course.
Now, this is what the Constitution says. So these words, any lawyer would know that when you have a statute that says the exclusive jurisdiction of the is vested in the court, it means to the exclusion of all other entities, persons, bodies, everything. No one else. The rule is the express mention of one thing in a statute is to the exclusion of every other thing. So if you mention jurisdiction is exclusive to the court, it can't be vested anywhere else. GCOM has absolutely no power to engage in anything to do, either generally or in a particular place an election has been lawfully conducted or the result thereof may have been affected by an unlawful act or omission.
Well, Sanjeev,
and I think that falls squarely into what Lowenfield has exceeded his mandate into doing. And that too should be that he's not empowered to do that.
Mr. Williams's argument is premised on subsidiary legislation, which he has opined here, is that Order 60 of 2020 is subsidiary legislation. I mean, we can talk more and more about it, but I think to our viewers and listeners, what he's imputing there is that because it's because the overarching constitution and legislation is more senior to this being a subsidiary legislation, then you would go back to okay.
Let me explain to you. Let me just explain to the viewers so that they understand. You have primary legislation, which is the act of parliament that is usually passed, etc. You then have subsidiary legislation, which are things like regulations, you know, sometimes when you pass legislation, you then have regulations as to how to implement the legislation. And you have like the High Court rules and things like that, which gives you procedures for doing things that are empowered to be done by statute. Now, what GCOM did was GCOM passed a resolution, and they wanted the world to know, and they put it in the Gazette. So everybody has that it's gazetted. Now, if we take it, this preposterous position that the mere fact that you put something in the Gazette makes it subsidiary legislation, it means this, Yog. Your transport and Leonard's transport that you have for the property is subsidiary legislation. So at any time in the future when you would like to sell it or do anything with it or give it to your children, remember you have to go to Parliament. Because subsidiary legislation, like primary legislation, can only be amended by Parliament. So that would also mean mortgages that are passed and advertised in the Gazette would be subsidiary legislation. God forbid the bank wanted to do something, they would have to go to Parliament as well. Trademarks, for all the trademarks and trade names that Kaichur News own, they would have to go to they would have to go to Parliament to do it. Can you imagine that if everything you advertised in the Gazette became subsidiary legislation, what would happen?
Good point.
All of the transports that are added, all of the transports that are added to the National Gazette are done by private people. Lawyers file it in the registry and it's sent. Do you know what we can do if we can change laws that way? It is preposterous. It is the stupidest, most childish thing I have heard from a lawyer. It can't be so. And it's certainly what he is saying about GCOM's powers. They have no power, and the chairman, the executive, has no power to do what it is. But you see, this has been an APNU narrative for some time. The APNU narrative was we will do what GCOM says we should do. But what they've managed to have GCOM do so far, lo and feel, is exceed his mandate in a manner that is very helpful to them. But I don't think that is anything to be too worried about in the grand scheme of things, because I think the commission, especially the chairwoman of the commission, is smart enough to realize that she wouldn't act on things where he has no mandate, and she should stick to the powers that are contained in the Constitution and have a report based on the numbers of the recount, which we all saw and we all know represents the will of the people, and make a declaration based on that.
So Sanjeev, Ramesh has sent a note here, and your opinion, of course, is sought, that, the framers of Guyana's constitution, contemplates, all sides of things. And this is why you have a 163, for example, so that it places things definitely within the ambit of the court and exclusively within the ambit of the court. Your comment?
Well, yes, the framers of the Constitution are presumed to have thought of everything. But to be honest,
but they didn't think of Lowenfield, right?
No. But this provision that we have, in fact, Yog, is common in the Commonwealth. And all of the Westminster-style constitutions that have been inherited from England in the independent countries. And it is common because even in England, a few centuries ago, what used to happen is when the theory is Parliament is in fact the highest court in the land. They just don't hear disputes anymore, but they are. In England, for example, the House of Lords still hear disputes, but they've moved away. They now call it the Supreme Court. Anyway, that's different. But basically, Parliament is the highest court in the land, the Speaker the highest judge. And that's the theory that used to happen. And what used to happen is when there was any dispute about what goes on in Parliament, it had to be determined by Parliament itself. And in fact, many things that go on as we found out in the past few years, has to be adjudicated upon by the Speaker. And problems within Parliament, punishing a member, doing anything, is exclusively the jurisdiction of Parliament. And the implementation and enforcement of parliamentary rules is exclusively for the Speaker to do, not the courts. The courts have no jurisdiction there. However, it was thought that when you came to issues about adjudicating upon the membership and upon how the members got there in the election, that to have them and their friends sit there to decide on what was right or wrong was not helpful to the population. Mm-hmm. So Parliament in England took a decision 200 odd years ago that what will happen, well, more than that, 300 odd years ago, that what would happen is they would give this jurisdiction to a court. And the reason why they gave the jurisdiction to the court got rules, you know how to file the proceedings, they got rules for evidence, they got burden and standard of proof, how that works, you know, all these things that they're capable of, you know, doing can be done. Because how would you take evidence at GCOM, for example? How do you file it? A letter? Do you, I mean, what is the burden? Who administers the oath? All these simple things become very complicated. So Parliament decided that it would be better to have an independent agency do it, which was the High Court. And the High Court inherently has the procedures and rules so that it could do that. Mm-hmm. That being the case is why the exclusive jurisdiction to determine these things about elections fall to the court. Because you don't want to put it into the Parliament, but you don't want to put it into a body that's set up is such that it would not be able to adjudicate upon this. For example, we should remember, I know that Justice Claudette Singh used to be a judge, and people think, well, because of that, she can adjudicate. Well, she's not been a judge for more than 10 years, and she's not sitting there as a judge. She's sitting there as chairman. Well, what would have happened if this had happened with Dr. Steve Search-Bally? He's never a judge. So what would happen with the two sides being deadlocked? They cancel each other. What would have happened with Major General Joe Singh? He's never been a judge. What would have happened with Rudy Collins? He was a diplomat. So how would that have worked? You can't become, or you can't get jurisdiction to adjudicate on it by virtue of the fact that the chairwoman is a former judge. That would be preposterous.
Right.
But you have no rules in place as to what she would do. She is obliged, chairwoman that is, she is obliged to follow the law.
Which is where
to the law.
Which is where we are, isn't it? That you that you know, it is widely believed by the legal minds like yourself, of course, that you know, her remit to act is very limited. The scope is very limited, and she's not a court. So yes. To adjudicate, to your point, yes, continue, please.
You see, one of the things that happened was this, and I see it, and I've heard it said only today. This is one of the things, right? And we must accept what the argument was. How is it the PPP was able to go stop Mingo and get his declaration set aside if the court had no jurisdiction? And how is it that we argued in the Hollander, the second Hollander case, that that we could have by Section 22, GCOM can amend its own amend legislation, etc., if they needed to be. Now, you have to remember one thing. They could amend and take steps if they wish to hold the election. That's where their might lies, in holding, leading up to before, not afterwards to amend and to do things. That's not possible. And the other thing is, what Mingo was doing was not following the law. And if you're not following the law, the specific provisions of the law, the court would have the right to judicial review.
Okay.
But what the court, and Chief Justice George said it very clearly. She said, I don't want to hear numbers. I don't want to hear what he came up with. What I want to know is how he came up with what he did if he followed the law.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't take it to court until for anything to do with that until the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
But you see what's happening here is we have a public official who's not following the law again. Let us hope the GCOM, the commission itself, obeys the law. Because once they do that, we're okay.
Yeah. But Sanjeev, let's come back to the language of Lowenfield's reports. Look, let me just share this with some of our viewers and listeners who might not have seen or might not have read the reports. One can look at the report for we are at Region District 4. And Lowenfield reports reads as follows, part number 7. A total of 466 ballot boxes stand affected due to a total of 1,862 anomalies and or alleged voter impersonation and unreconciled ballot boxes. Let me repeat, alleged voter impersonation and unreconciled ballot boxes. So that is clear what he said there. However, for the same District 4, he concluded, against the backdrop of using the word alleged, he has now concluded, finally, the summation of anomalies and instances of voter impersonation and unreconciled ballot boxes identified clearly does not appear to satisfy the criteria of impartiality, fairness, and compliance, blah, blah, blah. First of all, it is not his place to declare unfairness, impartiality, and compliance. That is what we have been deliberating thus far. But isn't there a dichotomy there then, Sanjeev? On one hand, he's saying something, and he's now concluding based on...
Yeah, and it probably demonstrates what you said earlier of multiple persons being involved in the writing of the report. But on both counts, it's irrelevant because both of those are him exceeding the mandate which he has by law and exceeding the mandate which the commission has asked him to discharge. Okay. So he has taken it upon himself to embark on a process that he has no mandate to do. And what the commission should do is disregard that. And they should make it clear that they are disregarding it because he has no authority to submit that to them. And they should consider what he has the authority to submit.
But Sanjeev, when we talk about the commission now, we're obviously talking about one person only, and that is the chairman.
Yeah, because the other three, the government and opposition cancel each other.
I mean, even me as an independent person here, I think I know where this report was written or who's been the intellectual minds behind the construction of such a report that shows multiple personalities and multiple writers. But let's talk going forward, Sanjeev, because you mentioned something important enough. How do you want to put this? Let me ask you, can the chairman disregard portions of this report, or must the chairman disregard certain portions of this report?
Well, I don't ever like to tell any public official that they must do this and that, because they might just decide to do the other just to prove me wrong.
But you are the guys that says may and shall, you know, you are the ones that say may and shall.
But the law,
give them an
the legal position would be, Yog, that the chairwoman is obliged to apply the law and to obey the law. And in obeying the law, she cannot countenance a chief elections officer who has disobeyed the law. So essentially, to the extent that he has exceeded his mandate, she should ignore that part because he didn't have the power to do it and commission didn't ask for that. But the part that he does have the authority to do, which was to submit the tabulation of the numbers, she should have regard to that because he has the power to do that. And in public law, as in many things, the principle of severance applies. Whatever are the the things that he's lawfully entitled to do, then you have to respect that. And the parts that he's not lawfully entitled to do, you could strike those down. That would be the approach in a court. But I'm saying that what it is now, I know it is a supremely improper, unfavorable position to be in, and it's to no one's benefit to have a chief elections officer who's insistent on exceeding his mandate in a manner that is so partisan. But at the same time, Guyana as a country must move forward, and in moving forward, what we're trying to achieve is an end to this election. And he has submitted the numbers, and he has submitted that the PPP has won. And I think everybody and their neighbor knows that the results are that the PPP has won the election. That being the case, I think we should move forward with that. And he should be asked, in accordance with the order that was passed by the commission, he should be asked to present a report in accordance with Section 96 that sticks exclusively to his mandate. And his mandate would be, of course, that he is to do the tabulation of the numbers. And GCOM should make it clear to all the parties that all of their objections and all of their concerns about what has gone on must go to a court. And they should file that application and get it heard by a judge.
Right.
You know,
Right.
It's not that they're not going to do that. You know, Yog, I'd said it before a few nights ago on your program, and it's the same thing now. The reason for the anxiety is because the coalition that is presently in power does not want to give up. So they have invented reasons. They have continuously invented reasons as to why they should remain. It was first that from the no confidence motion, it's because of all the things of holding an election. Then they went on to say, well, Mingo did the declaration, so we won, we should swear in. Then that was stopped. And then what happened after is the recount. And they're now trying to say distance the recount from truth. And they have come to say that the recount is not so. But if they have to raise these problems of what the ballots are saying versus what they are saying in their objections, it means GCOM would make a declaration and they have to go to court to reverse it. That would of necessity mean that they would be out of office while this is being.
Right.
And they don't want to relinquish power. But I don't think there is any human being, including them, that believe that they have proof of all of this. They keep talking about it. Why don't they show it? They will never show it. Like their SOPs, they will never show it. They will keep coming and inventing narratives and pretending to play on logic to deceive people. That's all this is. Plain and simple deception. And they will put their soldiers out and the accomplished parrots to repeat the narrative. That's been the game plan all along.
Okay. So let's do an off the pitch kind of thing here now. Scenario one, Leonard. Scenario or hypothetically we can say one. There seems to be a total parry in this report made to the chairman to declare a no result, to declare a null and void election. Sanjeev and Leonard, if there is a no declaration, if the chairman were to be so, I don't know how, on what basis of law she can ever make that declaration that is null and void. But if she were to make that, we know, and I wish to say this, we know that GCOM cannot hold an election till God knows when. So it means that somebody who's making a push for GCOM to make a no declaration, they know fully well that they want to remain in power until GCOM says it would be ready. So let's deal with that hypothetical scenario one, Sanjeev. Is there such an option available to the chairman?
Well, the first thing I want to say, Yog, is in your hypothetical, it's not possible. The chairman has to declare a winner. That is what the law says. GCOM has held an election. They have ballots in their possession. They have counted the ballots and they have recounted the ballots publicly. They have to declare a result based on what they have seen in the ballot papers. They can't choose to just disenfranchise the votes of the citizens. They can't take away my vote just because they're not satisfied or this or that. That's the cardinal rule. You can't disenfranchise. But if you're to go down so that's not a possibility. Let's be clear. Legally, that's not a possibility. But if we are to go down the road, that let us say that if that were done, then we would get to the 12th step of never. I mean, it would literally be up, you know what kind of creek without a paddle. We would really, because this all started from the no confidence. Cabinet didn't leave, they continued to do it. The authority was being exercised as if it was a government, not a caretaker government, a full-fledged ordinary government. They proceeded along those ways. They governed in that manner. They made arrangements. They sold land. They did all these things as if it were going on. Then we come to the second stage of things, which since the election, again, there's no obedience to the Constitution or the law. It's made up as we go along, and people say the most ridiculous and preposterous things, and they just go along with it and say, well, okay, we're obeying. And then, so if they go to that situation where they say, well, there's no result, that will just be going further down that road. We are going to be so far from the shore, I don't know if we will ever be able to navigate our way back as a country. Because who will call the election? Parliament has not come back. So how is the proclamation issued to dissolve? How is the date for election set? Who remains in government while all of this happens? What would be the function of GCOM if they can't run in this election? What makes you think they will be able to run the next one? If we follow what Lowenfield is saying, are we going to do house to house being specifically not permitted by our law any longer? Only as a means of verification. We have continuous registration. That's what is the applicable law now. Are they going to remove persons from the ballots? Are we going to have any budget? We're right now bankrupt. People are struggling. How do we pay our bills? Do we get access to the much talked about oil money, because it's being deposited in as I understand, New Jersey State or New York State Bank, and it's never going to be accessible until there's a legitimate government in place.
But Sanjeev,
how would that happen?
Yeah, let's come back to what you said there, because if you say, what you were saying there is true, that the hypothetical scenario one that I posited, it's highly unlikely because of so many questions thereafter. But here is the hypothetical scenario two. The report contains it. Lowenfield report contains both of these things. One is that the chairman is being persuaded to say it's null and void. And two, if the chairman is not persuaded to say null and void, then the chairman is presented with another scenario, that is to give the PNC 2/3 majority in parliament, which then negates all your problems and all your questions, because they could just pass whatever laws they want because they have 2/3.
No, well, it's not so much that's what they're saying would be I think those figures are more used for him to say scenario one, that the elections are not credible, which is the excessive mandate, because he does provide the charts and he does provide the count that came out of the recount. And the PPP won by 15,416 votes. So that part is put. But he has readjusted to say, if we do this readjustment, this is what it would be. But as a result, I don't think that it's fair and credible. So he's not really, in my mind, entirely trying to do that. What he's trying to do is create confusion. And he's creating confusion where he is confused. And where he is confused, his opinion doesn't matter. We don't need him to resolve it in his mind. We don't need him to act on it. What we need him to do is tabulate the 10 regions and present it to the commission. You see, Article 177 says that you are deemed the president if you are the person who gets the most votes. You are deemed the president. And the chairperson, the chairman of GCOM shall so declare. And it goes on to say, on the basis of a report from the chief elections officer. So what it's saying is the chief elections officer is obliged to give you, the chairman, the proper count. That's all it's saying. It is not saying he has his own right to prepare his report and go to Magic Kingdom and come back with Mingo. He can't do that anymore.
So let me put this over to you.
What he must do under 177, you have the most votes. He must put his report that you have the most votes, because that's what the count is. And the chairman of GCOM is commanded, the chairwoman is demanded by the Constitution to deliver that. If you look at 177, that's all it means.
So Sanjeev, hypothetical scenario 3. The chairman declares, based on the numbers in front of her, she declares PPPC would have won. And the APNU presidency and the APNU person say, well, we don't accept that because of what Lowenfield wrote here, and we will stay in power.
Well, they can choose not to accept it, but they won't be able to stay in power. They might want to use Lowenfield report, and if I were to be honest with you, I think that's the main purpose of the things being written in Lowenfield's report. I don't think that what's written into Lowenfield's report in this is to yield a declaration in favor of APNU. I think what it's really to do is to give fodder to the court proceedings that will follow. I might be wrong, but my view is that Lowenfield has given the numbers, which he is mandated to do. And as a result of what he has given, I think the declaration will be made.
I want you to know, sir, Mr. Attorney at Law, I want you to know that our president said last night on another media house, he said, quote unquote, we know what we are doing.
Well, I tell you what was my big concern when I heard that. My concern was that I don't want to say too much and get myself, but my concern were the ducks were in a row. I heard it stood out like a store thumb, and I thought to myself, the ducks are in a row.
Thank you very much for that.
But is that what you thought as well, Leonard, when you heard it?
I didn't hear that one there, but when you said ducks in a row, I want to tell you a couple of things there. But we go ahead in a very short while and open the lines. And of course, with your permission, Council, I think there's a lot of questions that people want to ask you. There is right now in our WhatsApp, to our WhatsApp phone 6222222. Could you ask Sanjeev if the swearing Ali is president rather than waiting for Claudette Singh, if there's a possibility?
Well, I tell you what, Leonard, given the realities of what's going on, there are all kinds of things of what can happen. But if we stick to what the law is the declaration must come first.
What can be done in the future to ensure that non-biased, non-partisan individuals are put in positions such as the CEO and the chairperson of GCOM? Will the PPP pursue criminal charges in the court against individuals aligned with electoral fraud and trying to thwart the will of the people?
I don't want to speak for the PPP because the PPP is a structured party with leadership. I can tell you, if I have a voice in anything to do with that, I will say yes. Persons who have put this country through this should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Not in a witch hunt, not to go, finding persons just to do these things, but we've all seen what has happened, and there should be accountability. What should happen in the future? I am a great believer in transparency. So all of these reports should be publicly presented. All of the deliberations from all of the deliberations that are being done by GCOM should be public. What they're saying when they're at GCOM and what people should hear, people should see. I tell you what, one of my professors is more an economist and known in the oil and gas circles, Sir Paul Collier. And he uses an example frequently. And he's convinced me. I don't know if he's the same believer as I am. But he says, if you were to walk in an empty parking lot and you saw $1,000 on the ground or £1,000 on the ground, he says the chances are you would pick it up and you might not say anything about it. It's there, nobody's around. There's no way for you to determine who it belongs to. You might pick it up. He says, however, if there was a camera in the parking lot, the majority of people, unprompted, would pick it up and try to take it to find the owner. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't, whether the camera worked or not was irrelevant to the concept of it. It was that you thought someone was looking. And when you think someone is looking, you usually would do the right thing. And I think that the way it has to be is the powers of the officials in GCOM and what they're doing requires more transparency. I also believe, as a result of this election, that if during an election cycle there are objections made to specific officers and their involvement in the process, as long as those objections are with foundation and they're not just frivolous, I think those people should be excluded. There were concerns about Lowenfield, Myers, and Mingo, because those were the people seen by the PPP perceived before to be the persons that they were. And if that is indeed the case, then I don't believe that you should have them involved. Why are they so peculiar to the process? Maybe it is time that we find, I have been doing some reading, and in some jurisdictions that I found mainly in the Asian, African countries, that the chief elections officer, there's usually two, meaning he has a guard. So both sides would have someone there.
Sanjeev,
So there are legislative, to answer you, there are legislative mechanisms that we can engage.
But what these elections have taught us as well, Sanjeev, is that, if somebody really wants, like what Mingo did, like what Lowenfield has done, they just totally ignore whatever regulations and whatever laws are there, and they do whatever they want. And the issue here is that we have never had, for all the past atrocities, nobody has ever been prosecuted. Nobody has felt the face of the law. Now, here is my next thing to you, and this has nothing to do with Lowenfield's report, but as a citizen of the country, as of yesterday afternoon, Mr. Granger held himself up. People call him sanctimonious. He held himself up to be above everything else. And while he held himself up to be above everything else, the rest of the party started to say whatever they want to say. But as of last night, he basically embraced everything. Now we are seeing that maybe he is one of the intellectual authors behind the scenes, because he has come a full circle and he has embraced, and he is covered for Harman, he is covered for everybody, and all the allegations in his mind now seem to be cast in stone.
Yeah, I thought that was indeed telling. It appears that Mr. Granger has come out and he has owned it. He's claimed that he really knows what's going on. Again, another reason I thought the ducks were in a row.
Correct. So, Leonard, I think you want to take in some calls?
Yes, we will. And before we do that, there is a comment here. I was away for 2 days, joining the program now. I feel like I just wake up out of a coma and I'm on Pluto. What madness in Guyana. So if you want to call us and you want to hear what madness in Guyana, maybe put in your 2 cents, 226-7453. You call us on that. You WhatsApp us on 6222222. We're going to take your calls. We want to hear in room 592. What are your thoughts on elections 2020 and exactly with regards to the report that would have been tendered to the chair of GCOM, Justice Retired Kwadrat Singh today, and some of the developments on that? There's a caller on line already. Good evening, caller. You on the air?
Hey, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
As a concerned citizen, observing the elections since the 2nd of March, it's appalling to see the level of disrespect that the administration has shown towards the electorate. I mean, I've listened to the program quite often, and sometimes I don't agree, and sometimes I do, but I think the job that is being done by Mr. Mahadeo is very pleasing to us as Guyanese. We should all acknowledge the wrong that is done. It doesn't matter the party you support or the what you should say your political view, but wrong is wrong. Wrong cannot be right. I can't see how come after all this we are at the same position we started after Mingo, because this is where we are today again. The declaration, the report by Mr. Lowingfield showed blatant disregard for the populace, for the people of Guyana. There is no justification for that report. His accusations is just accusations as the APNU. They are not based on fact. They're accusations without anything to support it. And I cannot see how come somebody who is supposed to be intellectual, who is supposed to hold a post, could put those things in a report. You cannot put hearsay in a report like that. You have to put facts, proven something. Nothing is proven. They're accusations. How can you put accusations in your report? It doesn't make sense. I think you guys need to, clarify these things, because it is the simple word is stupid. How can we move forward from this? You're talking about cohesiveness. You're talking about inclusive governance, but then you're disregarding the people. How are we to move forward when it is shown that there is no regard for the other side? It is just that the idea of one side is being put forward.
That's.
I mean, it is. I'm in my early 30s. I supported the AFC. I was a member of the AFC. I was party, and then I left. The reason I left was because of the coalition. Because I saw that collating with the PNC as before with the WPA and the UF, it would never bring nothing good. By collating with the PNC, the party lose their voice, and we saw it today.
Thank you very much. Any other thing?
But, yes, we have to understand there's no way of moving forward if we cannot come around. Because if we allow, as Guyanese, allow this to happen, we allow this election to go void, how can we trust that GCOM or this government would provide a free and fair election in the future? We could never, ever, ever.
Well, yes, thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Election, because the same core personnel are there and the same mechanism is there. So how? It is impossible. We need a credible result based on what people ask for.
Thank you very much, caller, and we are going to
let's make the calls. Let's make the calls very brief to the point, because we had a lot of people coming in. But to that caller's point, that is indeed a good question, caller. Yes. That is, if this is allowed to happen, it means whoever forms the next government, God forbid, we'll never be able to get them out of office, because elections just wouldn't matter.
Right. Thank you for that, Dr. Yog Mahadeo. If you're now joining us, room 592, and it's been hosted by Dr. Yog Mahadeo and myself, Leonard Gildarie. We have with us here attorney at law Sanjeev Datadin. And if you're calling us, we want you to call us in. We want to hear about elections 2020. Short and sweet. Ask the council some questions with regards to what has been with regards to this report by Keith Lowenfield, Chief Elections
Let's
Officer, to the
let's hope
chairperson.
let's hope Sanjeev doesn't send his bill to you there.
Well, I am broke at the moment, and other people are broke too, including the country. So, over there's a caller line. Good evening, caller. You in here? Yes. Could you lower your volume? Could you lower your volume on your phone? Hello. Could you lower the volume on the radio, please?
Sorry?
Could you lower the volume on the radio? Thank you.
It's lowered?
Yes, thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. I've got a question. The gentleman there with you is whom?
That is attorney at law Sanjeev Datadin. He's also a candidate for the People's Progressive Party Civic.
Okay, fine. Now, he just said something to me. He just said something that actually kind of confirmed my thoughts. Now, he said, if you went in a car park, you found some money, and you know that there's no camera, you probably pocket it. But if there's a camera, you will try to find the owner. Now, why would Mingo, in front of the world, try to rig the election? I'm not there seeing it. I was listening to you guys on the day, and I was shouting no. And I had a sleepless night. How can someone so brilliant try to rig an election in front of the whole entire world? Now, your gentleman there said more or less the same thing. And then everything seems to be upside down. People not being there to say anything. The chairman, and I do have faith in her. I think she's a very nice lady. I always did. And she's not saying much. What is really going on? Mm-hmm. What is going on? Why every time there's an election, everything goes upside down with race and everything? And people sit on the sideline and see the citizens stir each other up.
Any question, sir? Yes.
I'm a person who from a little boy believed in a one-party state. People tell me if you have that, you'll have a dictator. Not if you have strong people, strong citizens to actually make sure that the go right. Anyway,
thank you, sir.
That's my say. I take.
Thank
you guys have a good night. I've been enjoying your show, and I don't believe most. Oh, by the way, Leonard.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned a gentleman named a few weeks back, Mataya Mohammed, Malaysia, a brilliant man, the most truthful politician there is in the world.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
He said, there is no politician who isn't corrupt.
I thank you very much for that, sir, and I'm going to throw that right away to our attorney at law here, who happens to be a politician. Are all politicians corrupt, sir? I can't get away from that.
No. Come on. No. I'm not even going to ask Mr. Datadin to comment, because Mr. Granger, our president, campaigned on a platform of honesty and integrity. Come on, Leonard.
No. I can't miss this thing. It's Sanjeev Datadin is here. He's a lawyer. You can answer it. I know the man to answer, man. What's wrong with you?
What I would say is this. I know the caller made reference to the thing that if there is a camera, then the person is not likely. You have to realize that the whole test, apparently it was a test, and it was a test that was done. You have to realize that the thing was most people will not. There's still people who will still take the money and couldn't be bothered whether you saw it or not. So that's a reality. That's a reality. But the thing is, where do you stand? What's your best chance?
Right.
Your best chance of transparency is to open it up so that everybody knows. No secrets. That's always the best way to do it. And I think it's not only in elections. I think it's the way for Guyana to get out of its current difficulties with allegations of corruption and difficulties that we have with public confidence in the institutions we have. We need to open them up so that people can actually see what's going on.
As to why you would want to
Okay.
rig an election in front of the camera, I am not so bright. I don't know if you gentlemen want to take a shot at that.
I will tell you why it is. It's because I honestly think, and I've had this conversation with quite a few people. No one actually believed that the outcry with what was going on would have been to the extent it was. And I think the media has to be thanked principally for that. The coverage, the live feeds, the live coverage that was done by some of the media houses, the larger media houses like Kaichor News, but some of the one-man shows, some of the one-man operations that were there and carrying things live, and people would see it. And what happened is that motivated persons, and it excited them in an outrage almost, where people spoke up and they fought. And when the pushback came, I think after the Mingo spreadsheet plan, there might not have been a discernible concrete plan as to how to go about trying to rig the elections after that. It's been a play it by ear and take whatever avenue opens up.
Correct. Sanjeev, I want to come back to something very quickly. I've been looking whilst you were making your commentary. I was looking at a couple of things. I want to read to you the final summation for Region 10, District 10. This is in Lowenfield's report, and it reads Summary of Observation Reports for District 10. Mr. Datadin, it reads as follows. Finally, the summation of anomalies and instances of voter impersonation identified in District 9 clearly does not appear to satisfy the criteria of impartiality, fairness, and compliance with provisions, blah, 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 blah. It cannot be ascertained that the results for District 10, Upper Demerara Berbice, meet the standard of fair and credible elections. So based on this, there is not a region or district then that meets criteria to satisfy Lowenfield. That's one. And you can clearly see cut and paste at work here because, you know, this thing about...
Yeah, but the important part to note about that, Yog, is this. What happened was he's exceeded his mandate by doing that. And you should simply disregard it. Notwithstanding the obvious cut and paste error, it should be disregarded because he is saying it does not meet the standard of fair and credible elections. What is the standard, and how did he become the arbiter? And what standard is he applying? From where and why? Now you see, the thing is, he does not have the power, and that should be entirely disregarded. We should stick to the numbers. And I hope that the chairwoman does as well. The thing is, you see, this is all part of the chicanery, in my mind, designed to excite a court. You know, this is it.
So let me remind viewers and listeners out there that before we asked Mr. Datadin to come on tonight, we did extend an invitation to persons on the APNU AFC slate 2. We did invite, and I would really love to see I'd love to have Mr. Anil Nandlal here together with Mr. Joe Harman. The two persons, a person from each side come here probably tomorrow night, or to have, to ask whether council here can return and have somebody on their side. We have been, ladies and gentlemen, extending invitations to persons from APNU AFC to come, and they have not as yet. We have been mindful of Mr. Gunraj's position in the commission, and we have not asked him to come here as a commissioner. But at the end of the day, Sanjeev, regardless of how we turn this or twist it, regardless of all the verbiage, Leonard, that we want to use here, it is left to one person, Claudette Singh, to decide whether she is going to allow the legitimate expectation of the voters in this country to have their votes counted or not. It is left to one person, and if it is left, as Sanjeev Datadin said, if it is left to that one person to Claudia Singh to make that determination, then Claudia Singh has to make a declaration because only the High Court can listen to a petition concerning these elections. Did I summarize it right or wrong, Counsel?
That is indeed correct.
Thank you.
think,
I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
He's getting there. But let me tell you, during this elections 2020, and even you go back as far as December the 21st, 2018, since from that no confidence motion, I think the Guyanese people were schooled in the Constitution. You learned some words. I think they even coined some words like fabulation comes after tabulation. Some very good things. But here's a question.
Fabulation.
Fabulation.
You must also, it's good to quote your source, you know, it's good to quote where you got your stuff.
Hey, calm down. No, you got to calm down. We're not obligated to name sources here. Hi, good night. How come in 2015, when there were 33 fake statement of polls, Lowenfield did not say that the elections weren't credible, or is it because APNU won? I'm just putting it out there. There's a caller online. You guys could answer after this. Good evening, caller. You on the air? Yes.
Hi, good evening, guys.
Good evening, sir.
So I've been following you for quite some time. Probably we're at day 100 or something. And I called you maybe a month ago, and I congratulated you guys for your hope that you continue to have. But it's unfortunate that we're here now. I actually was trying to call you guys on your more famous program, on the midday program the other day when you had the APNU recount and tabulation agents. And I heard some shocking things. And one of them was about Mingo's declaration still being an alleged fraud. And it was very disturbing for me that anyone running for public office could still say something like that is an alleged fraud when his official declaration has his signature on it. And for any public official listening, I want them to know that once you put your signature on a document, you can and will be held accountable by it. And you can't later come and say that this is not me and me and no. And some, I think what they said was he was simply tabulating votes given to him by some agent or some clerk. So that is nonsense. Further to that, I just want to keep it brief. Why I didn't have hope a month ago is because Guyana, since even before the no confidence motion, has been on the path of becoming, in my opinion, a failed state. And I would like you gentlemen and your viewers to note that there are 23 countries in the world that have more than 60% of their export earnings that are based on oil production. And not a single one of them is a democracy. And that is not a coincidence. So I'd like you to take a moment to reflect on that. And I see the Learned Counsel, Mr. Datadin there, and I'm sure he's thinking about all the legal recourses he could take now. But I think we've seen clearly up to this point the law and the legal avenues that we have been quite ineffective. So I continue to not remain hopeful that we will see an end to this, even through the courts. And for me personally, I think Guyana is pretty much split in half. And you have a lot of the coalition supporters that are still backing their government because they want to see them in power. The only time I could see or foresee the government conceding to their feet is when their own supporters start turning against them, when they start to suffer just as every other Guyanese. So that's just my comment here for tonight, and I wish you guys well and continue to fight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear caller.
Leonard, let me just say this. So I'm going through the report here, and let me just put this to our viewers and listeners out there. Put it this way. Lowenfield is much better, is a much better person. And I'm not being facetious here, Mr. Datadin. Mr. Lowenfield is a much better person than Mr. Mingo. Mingo ended up removing About how much? About 3,000 votes from the PPPC, I think. Right?
And adding 23,000
and adding
to the
50,
other side.
yes. But what Lowenfield has done is remove over 100 something thousand from the PPP. In fact, in Lowenfield's report, APNU has one reason 6. In
Yes.
Lowenfield's report, the most amazing, this guy has to be much better than Mingo, with everybody watching on, everybody listening to the recount, everybody hearing all the fluff from one side. But Lowenfield has given APNU an even bigger victory than Mingo did. And so let's put
Well,
that.
But the truth is he does declare the correct numbers, and he does put the recount numbers. So let's give him credit for that. That's what his job was, and that's what he did. He
Well-
got a little excited and went beyond his remit, so we should ignore that. And that is really what it comes down to. It comes down to a simple process of accepting what is legal and severing from it that which is illegal. So wherever he exceeded his mandate, just sever it and move on, because the country has to move forward. We can't keep going around in circles. So we're one step closer, and we're one step further down the road, and Mingo's numbers that he declares are the recount numbers, so we accept it and we moved on. So now it's for GCOM to say, well, present a report on that, and let's get a declaration.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go on, Leonard. Go on.
Yes. So room 592 here with Dr. Yog Mahadeo and Leonard Gildarie, and with our special guests here this evening, attorney at law Sanjeev Datadin. Counsel, there is a question for you in the WhatsApp. What if the commission decides to exclude the boxes with the issues as shown by the CEO? Could the court direct the declared figures to be used to swear in the president?
The short answer is that, well, before I answer, I want to say that they can't exclude the boxes. So as a matter of law, they can't exclude the boxes. So it's not that GCOM can do that. But if what you're saying is if they do exclude the boxes, can the court direct them that they ought to take it into consideration and doing the count? Yes. I mean, if that were so, but I'm saying that there's no position. There's no legal basis. You see, we got to go back to the fundamental always. That usually solves every legal problem that you're facing. The fundamental is, can you take away the franchise? Can you take away the vote? Now, you have got to have very good reasons to prove that my vote that I did is problematic and it falls foul of the law. Other than that, you can't take it away. That's the reality. And what you have to remember, if you find one problem in a ballot box, for example, the poll book is absent, that don't mean that you discard all the votes you find in it, because one document, you're telling me an official of GCOM who is being paid to do a job, don't do their job possibly, and as a result, you take away my vote? That would be preposterous. So if you open the box and they don't have the poll book, you can't find the poll book, you take away the votes. If they don't have the official list of electors, which should be in there, or the folio, or they didn't tick off all the links. You see, there were issues with the list that ticks off all the voters in some cases, because what happened is the presiding officers collected them back from all the persons, the party reps that they had given them to. That should have been left with them, but in some cases they wanted it back. I don't know why, but they'd take it back and put it in. Now, when you go to the bathroom or when you were eating, you might have missed a couple. The presiding officer might have missed a couple. So the numbers would vary a little bit. You have 10, I have 5, or I have 8, and Yog has 11. Those things could happen, but those are not legal requirements.
Right.
You know? Those are not legal requirements, and they don't form part of the record keeping, the folio. So these sorts of things you have to understand, that not because an official from GCOM, who is a public officer, did not do the job in the exact letter and line of the law, you can take away all the votes in that box. Even in the issue of the East Coast, where they were boxes where only the ballots are in the box. And that was because they received an instruction from a DRO that that's what to do. And all of the documents were put into the poll bag. Now you have to understand, and that's why people going there was very important, especially with people who had not been involved with it before, like myself. I had not been involved before to that extent. But when you get on election morning, you get a box which has the ballots and some of the things, and you get a poll bag that would have the seal and the stamp and pens and things like that. So there are two things that you get. What they were told is put it in the poll bag. They put it in the poll bag, they returned it to the GCOM. Those documents have been accounted for and they have been located.
Right.
And as far as I'm aware, it's been accounted for all. But it wasn't put in the box. But nobody is saying that it was, thrown away or hidden. It wasn't put in the box because somebody took it upon themselves to do this. Now, let us understand this. So all those 7,000 ballots that was affected by that, approximately 7, you're saying you will disregard it? How could that be possible? The people, so that if that were so, then every ballot box in this country, you could have someone do something untoward with it and you will disenfranchise the nation.
Right.
And don't forget too,
it's not that simple for you to take away people's votes.
And don't forget too that the people you're talking about are GCOM employees. Those polling officers, those returning officers, they are GCOM employees. They're not any party agents. They are Lowenfield's employees. He had supervision over everybody. So, ladies and gentlemen, I know we're going to get down to program time just now, but I want to say this. With Leonard, with regards to Lowenfield's report here, there is something we need to make very, very open and clear to everyone. Lowenfield has pointed to his report, these irregularities and these anomalies. However, we have to remember, no independent observer none of them were allowed to check that those ticks were indeed ticked. This is all within the privacy of GCOM. No independent observer was allowed to supervise when GCOM said something was ticked off or unticked, that was true. There has not been anybody that checked that. And so if Lowenfield says it was ticked, I don't know that I could trust as a citizen of this country whatever Mr. Lowenfield said. And that has to be ventilated to the full, because how do you trust this man now after having seen what he has done, knowing the same Lowenfield, knowing that Mingo's report was fraudulent, still went and on the 14th of March prepared a report using Mingo's fraudulent numbers. Here he is again using allegations, using assumptions, and making a decision.
Yes, thank you very much, Yog. We have been given some time by management. They tell us that we could continue. A lot of people have been calling.
I see Council looking at his watch.
Council, you got to run?
Right. I was just checking the time.
No. They said that we could take some time because they said that you want to take some call. Good guys, good day, good night, guys. My question is, after the declaration is made and it is confirmed that Dr. Irfan Ali is the new president, can the PNC file an injunction to stop the swearing in? To you, Council. The Council is smiling. Is there?
Yes, I'm here. No, my earphone just fell out. Sorry.
Yes, sir. Go ahead. Do you want me to read back the question?
Yeah.
Good evening, guys. My question is that after the declaration is made and it is confirmed that Dr. Irfan Ali is the new president, can the PNC, I presume this is the coalition, file an injunction to stop the swearing in?
My guess is I had anticipated in my own mind that was the likely position of when the approach to the court would have been made. I don't know that the court would have had any jurisdiction at that stage to stop anything happening. An election petition had to be filed. And the injunction, to get an injunction while an election petition is in play is very unlikely. It was not, I'm not saying that it would not have been filed. My understanding is that was when they were going to file legal proceeding. But whether it would be successful is a whole different issue.
Okay. And Leonard, also I wish to remind everyone that, look, the PNC, APNU, AFC, this grouping has been consistent. Sanjeev, if it's anything, you can say that APNU AFC has been consistent with a number of things. And let me just outline them in 1 minute to everybody. Look, no confidence motion passed, right? The president decided, well, the party decided they were going to challenge whether 33 was greater than 32. Remember all of that history, Guyanese brothers and sisters. Also, I want everybody to remember, as I am reminded here, that Granger went ahead and appointed, this writing was on the wall a long time, you know, it's just that probably we were not seeing it. Granger went ahead and appointed Patterson for the chairman of the Elections Commission, notwithstanding the advice of the Chief Justice. When the Chief Justice gave her advice, her legal opinion to the president, what did he say? He said the Chief Justice has her views and I have mine. And this country had to go through all of that. So this thing has been happening more than a year. We have seen instances where after the CCJ declared its government as a caretaker government, duty-free, sale of properties, well, giveaway of government state assets has continued to happen. We are seeing under COVID-19, even though elections have taken place, we are seeing people using state assets to broadcast their own political divisive nonsense, competing with private media. We have seen the RAG, which is the Chronicle, continue to do the nonsense it's doing. And I know I have Mr. Datadin here, but tonight he's not here on behalf of him being a member of the slate of the PPP, because I'm insistent we must defund the Chronicle. It happened in pre-2015 with the nonsense of the Chronicle, and it has happened again, and that has to stop. We, taxpayers of this country, we are funding people to bypass us, and that has to stop. Sorry, Leonard, I had to carry on a little bit.
Thank you very much. And I'm not sure whether I'm among politicians or lawyers. Is there a difference? and there's a rhetorical question. There's a caller online. If you want to call us, it's 226-7453, 226-7453. You could also WhatsApp us on 6222222. You can read the message. And if you're now joining us, it's room 592 with Dr. Yog Mahadeo and myself, Leonard Gildarie, with attorney at law Sanjeev Datadin, who happens to be the candidate or a candidate for the People's Progressive Party Civic. It's a caller online. Good evening, caller. You're on the air. Yes, could you lower your volume on your radio, please?
Sorry.
Thank you.
My
Go
question
ahead.
is simple.
Yes, sir.
Is there any way, this is Director Mr. Datadin,
Yes, sir.
is there any way that we could, or the PP could have GCOM declare their SOPs? Because I think by declaring their SOPs, that would clarify a lot of things. That would either contradict or conform the declaration made by GCOM.
That's the question? All right. We take it off here. Thank you very much. Sanjeev, you heard the question. Is there any way? I'm
He
not
would
sure.
say if we could get GCOM to declare what?
The SOPs, the SOPs.
To release the SOPs.
Yes.
As long as there are legal proceedings after the declaration, I think that those are going to have to be produced, yes. But in terms of before the declaration, it would be difficult to do because usually the SOPs are connected to election petitions. You see, the public law duty is there's no duty for them to disclose. That's probably a change that can be implemented by law. Something that I have been thinking a lot about, I was thinking to myself, you know, in all of this thing, if the law in Guyana was that immediately after the election, as soon as they receive it, GCOM were to declare all the SOPs, a lot of this would not happen. Mm-hmm. But there is no law to require them to declare it. GCOM should have a law that they should do it immediately following an election upon receiving it. and they should do it not less than 2 days later, because they will have it within 2 days. And let the whole country get out their calculators and add it up and tell them what it is.
Well, I guess there's something that would have to happen. There's a question for you two gentlemen. Good night, everyone. My question: if the chairperson, and I know you would have addressed it somewhat, but let's try again here. If the chairperson declared null and void the elections, what happens next?
Well, there is no legal authority for her to do that. But if she does, we slip into this great black hole. We have no rules or laws that would guide us as to what to do. We have no way of setting a date. We have no way who will remain in power. We don't know who could issue the proclamation, and proclamation, you must issue a proclamation to declare what's the date for elections. We don't know how any of these things can take place. We are so far from the shore, as I said before. I don't know if we'll find our way back from something like that.
Right. Well, the other question that you can ask, Leonard, if APNO AFC, all the shenanigans from March 2nd to now, and they're talking about having fresh elections, I don't know in which country they're going to have those fresh elections to hope to win. Because, across the country, there are small groupings of persons that are drinking the Kool-Aid every day, and they continue to drink it. God bless them. And I certainly hope that God continues to bless them. But obviously, a lot of people are seeing what's going on here and are feeling extremely, extremely frustrated. I must say this. Look, the President Granger, is the only officer recognized in law after these elections. Council will correct me if I'm wrong, but in law. He can, of course, appoint who he wants because he is president, of course. But the truth is that you have, under a country that has a tremendous health crisis, a severe health crisis, you are appointing a bunch of politicians to manage the health crisis, paying them fancy salaries. You have non-critical ministries still operating, non-critical, still paying and still earning fancy salaries, while people are starving in this country. That's how much they care for the people in this country.
There is a question here for the good counsel. Could you say what happened to the declaration that is being held in abeyance? I presume this is a second declaration by Clement Mingo. Can they use it?
The holding in abeyance, I guess it's just that they were saying, well, we'll see what to do with it, presumably. But the reality of holding it in abeyance, it can't possibly be acted upon now. The statement of recounts, which are done for all 10 regions, have replaced the tabulated results for the previous 10 regions. That was the purpose of the recount. And I understand the narrative that if this recount is not valid, you would go and take that, the ones that existed before. But that can't be the position, because what happened is upon these statement of recounts coming into being, those go. Now, even if you were to say no, it would be very difficult in the face of clear evidence and very clear evidence at the recount that was made public that Mingo's numbers did not match up to anything that he called out. And there was a difference of probably 26,000 votes by plus and minus, in plus on one side, the APNO side, and minus on the PVP side. You can't possibly declare that as a result for Region 4 anymore. It would have that would be wrong. That would pure and simple be wrong. But to answer what happens to the abeyance, the votes, the declaration, the tabulated results in abeyance fell away once the recount SORs were done.
Very good. So if you're now joining us, room 592, Dr. Yog Mahadeo, myself, Leonard Gildarie, and attorney at law, Sanjeev Datadin, candidate for the People's Progressive Party. There's a caller online. Good evening, caller. You on the air?
Good night.
Good night, sir.
Listening to Sanjeev and Dr. Mahadeo and yourself, and the declaration of Mr. Lowenfield, our society, we all know, is a divided one. And coming down to the declaration of this result, Now that Mr. Lowenfield has said what he said, how is it going to be for those who had voted for APNU AFC when they hear that they have been cheated, when there is going to be a declaration by the commission that Mr. or Dr. Irfan Ali has won the election? I believe this is a dangerous thing. Our country will be in serious problem. For those who believe there has been cheated, because Mr. Lowenfield has done a disservice to this country. And we must see this in this perspective. No one has discussed this on your program. And I believe that we should explore and let us see how we tell those people that inevitably there will be a winner and that our country do not go down the path that it went before. That is what is my contribution, side.
Thank you very much.
Yes. I will tell you this, Leonard. It's a valid concern. Are we going to descend into violence? Are we going to descend into a state of civil unrest? The realities are this. We are still, it is still possible that we will not if the right approach is taken. But I would say this, that there's always a winner and a loser, and there will be some discontent. And I agree that what has happened by what Lowenfield has done and what Mingo has done, it has invigorated people to believe that they're going to be robbed, and that will excite them to the point where they will come and fight for their rights. But surely they would have realized there's nobody in Guyana that legitimately believes what has happened. Sure, what they have seen and observed and become aware of is this is a naked fight to hang on to power. And if that is what the result is in those circumstances when they're fully aware, then it's going to have to be something that's addressed and dealt with. And both leaders are going to have to figure out what to do. And hopefully better sense prevails than for us to descend into a state of uncivility. But if the leadership must be such. And it is also the leadership of APNU that has been leading their people, telling them that these are the things. They should have disclosed their SOPs immediately if they thought they had won. Would have solved a lot of the problems. But we now understand that they don't see on giving up power.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Whatever happens, I hope peace prevails, but it may not. And that's a stark reality.
So we have had Dr. Hines, Mr. Lincoln Lewis, and a whole host of other people, including Dr. Henry Jeffrey, who sat on different programs and so on throughout the Guyana and different and even in the United States. We have people of an African descent sit there and give credibility to what Lowenfield is doing. This must be addressed immediately. If we do not do this, then there is cause for concern as to the development of our country upon the swearing in of Dr. Ali. If that doesn't happen, then we are going down a serious road. There must be a program at some time that we address this thing, because I can't understand. These are doctors, and somehow they believe that something went wrong and that they have a right to be part of something that ought not. This is something ridiculous. I don't know how to put it.
All right. Thank you, dear call. Any other point?
No, that's it. This is something.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Leonard,
Yes.
Leonard, my dad used to remind me, and I'll say I'll pass this over to counsel. I'm sure he will use it at some stage in his long, future, illustrious career. Um, Literacy is not the sign of an educated man. I wouldn't say more. I want to remind viewers and listeners, Leonard, that in 1985, history is very important, you know. In 1985 elections, Desmond Hoyt, head of the PNC, the PNC claimed, GCOM claimed that the PNC won 42. Was it 42? Let me just check. 42 seats in parliament and the PPP had 8. 1985 elections, the PNC had won, and we are seeing a repeat here. And a couple of months ago, when Patterson was GCOM chair and when the elections were going the way I had cause to ask whether we had Harold Boller's, reincarnation and that paradigm. And to that caller that just called in, it seems like we also have Polydor's reincarnation in modern day politics. I cannot go into more details except to put it like that.
And a quick question here for maybe straight to Mr. Datadin. My question, if GCOM declares the PPPC as the winner and on the same day APNU or the coalition files an election petition, now hypothetically they refuse to hand over powers to the PPPC and claim that they will only do so until the petition is completed, is this possible and what is the legal remedy?
Well, if what has happened is the declaration is made and Dr. Irfan Ali is sworn in, then the tenure of the presidency of Granger comes to an end. So he would have no right to remain there. We have, hopefully, still a civilized society and a police force that will enforce the law. So it will come down to that. If, however, they want to go ahead and file a petition and say they don't want to give up, I mean, it's not within their power to do that. They're entitled to file a petition if they are they're certain of all of this. Then what they should do is be prepared to go to court as quickly as possible and pursue it as quickly as possible and have an adjudication from the court as quickly as possible. But I have said this before. I find that it is dishonest that persons have seen the same things. Persons have seen what has happened. Persons are aware of the numbers, but they still try to promote as if those things didn't happen. And they try to invent reasons which they know they are inventing only for disruption and chaos. But you see, it's a bigger thing that we have to address in our society, and that is we can't have the PNC and the remnants of the PNC bully the nation as has been happening before. It's a harsh reality. It's something that has to be addressed. But there is the constant fear of what happens if supporters go on the street. Guyanese are constantly worried about that. On this particular occasion, the COVID-19 might have been a blessing in disguise.
I want to ask you this personally, Yoga. This is a question from me. There's a declaration on Monday afternoon or Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock by the chairperson of GCOM. Could this be used by the chancellor without receiving any kind of documentation in her hands to move right away to swear in anybody, whether it's the Granger or Irfan Ali?
Once the declaration is made by the chairman, the convention, I have checked into it with previous chairman and I've looked at what the legal position is. The chairman would usually inform the chancellor to be available, and the chancellor would then be there to swear in whoever's the person declared by GCOM to be the winner.
So hypothetically, while that declaration is happening, the chancellor could be standing by and use that declaration as the official thing?
The declaration is the official thing.
So there's no need for a document or anything to stop that. Sorry, there's no need for a document.
Yeah, but the document is done simultaneously. They all
Sanjeev, is
declaration,
Claudius?
for example, as I've been told by previous commissioners, the declaration is already prepared. For both sides, they usually would prepare a declaration, and once they know from the count which word it is, they fill in the names and they print it and they have it.
Is that
So
declaration required to be made public, or is it a declaration given to the chancellor?
Well, the issue was examined when there was the 2000 election with Janet Jagan about whether the declaration needed to be public or not. All that is required and came out of that decision really is all that is required is the chancellor has to be satisfied that that is the fact. So the chairman is informing of the truth without, not deceiving, or the person informing her is in fact the chairman and not somebody impersonating. So as long as the chairman is satisfied that that is the declaration, then they are obliged to go ahead. The chairman can choose, in theory, to say, let me see your piece of paper, but
because you use a dangerous word. You say the chancellor has to ensure there is no impersonation.
impersonation of GCOM chairman.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a dangerous thing now. We don't know who has been impersonated from GCOM's perspective.
I would like to see somebody who resembles a good chairperson.
But the thing about it, Leonard, to get back to your question, you could see why when we step away from the law, how every further step becomes more difficult to navigate. Because the minute we go off the beaten path and the prescribed path of the law, every step has 4 options, 5 options. It could be this, it could be that. And then each further step, the permutations are exponential. But if you stay on the beaten path of the law, then there is always only one step next. The minute you step off, there is the speculation, if this is so and if that is so. And if they do this and if they do that. And if the officer chooses to ignore this or to accept that. The uncertainty quotient goes through the roof. You understand? Okay. But realistically, what we hope, and I hope happens quickly, is that GCOM instructs Law and Field to say, the Commission instructs Law and Field to say, look, present us a report in accordance with Section 96 of the Act, which you have to do. We would like the numbers and we would like the seat allocation. You don't really have a right to give us all these things, these opinions, and you've exceeded your mandate. Keep that to yourself. Present the proper report for us to consider.
Thank you very much, Zia.
That's the position.
Thank you very much, Zia.
And Leonard, I've just gotten a message that says that one of the persons, I'm not going to call any names, but a person from APNU side has said electoral fraud will soon lead to an APNU AFC victory. And my response is, damn right. Electoral fraud may lead to a victory for your party, but we know where the fraud exists. It's in GCOM.
Thank you very much, dear Dr. Yog Mahadeo. And before I hand you over back to the host, let me say thank you very much, dear, to all of our listeners and viewers across this land and overseas, wherever you've been joining us from. Very good comments and calls to our program here this evening. You've been very faithful with us, and I want to say thank you very much. And of course, we'd want to say thank you to Attorney at Law Sanjeev Datadin, candidate for the PPPC. Thank you for joining us, sir. And of course, I give the floor over to Dr. Yog Mahadeo, the host of Room 592, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leonard. Thank you, Yog, for having me anytime.
Yog, over to you.
Both of you, and may your God be with you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And do give our regards to your family, Sanjeev. We know that we have taken you away.
As always.
From your family for tonight. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to remind you, Guyana has had a problem with math since 2018. We now seem to have a problem with English. I certainly hope our children who are our future will do better at math and English. And of course, comprehension and analysis. These political battles and these positionings continue. I know, ladies and gentlemen, please stay in tuned and attuned to Kaito Radio and to our social media pages. We are hoping to put together a program for tomorrow night, depending on what's the play during the day tomorrow. If things continue to go the way they are, or if there are changes in the political scene during tomorrow, we are certainly going to put together a team for tomorrow night and continue the discussion in room 592 tomorrow night. So please stay attuned and in tune to what we are saying and doing here on Kaito Radio, YouTube, and Facebook. Let me say thanks to my co-host, Leonard Gildarie, and thanks to you all for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. And if you can, when you can, and as often as you can, say a prayer for this beautiful country of ours. If never before, you better do it now. So, ladies and gentlemen, stay safe. Remember, you can disagree with each other, but don't go further than just verbal disagreement. Stay safe, everyone. Good night. Bye-bye now.
All right. Good night. Take care.